A heartless father decides to abandon his wheelchair-bound daughter in a train car, claiming he can't handle the situation and doesn't want that kind of responsibility. Robert had always been a cold, distant man, unable to deal with his feelings. Since childhood, he had learned that vulnerability was weakness, and any show of affection was something shameful. He grew up in a rigid household, where there was no room for warmth or understanding, and this shaped a harsh personality in him, impatient and intolerant of anything that deviated from his standards. He became extremely pragmatic, guided only by logic and what he considered acceptable, rejecting anything that required emotional flexibility. When Charlotte was born with a condition that left her wheelchair-bound from an early age, Robert could not accept her. He never saw her as a daughter, but as a mistake, an unwanted responsibility. He silently despised her, masking it as indifference. To him, the girl was a constant reminder of a destiny he had not chosen, something entirely out of his control. Despite this, the presence of Laura, his wife, kept some balance. Laura was everything Robert was not: sweet, caring, and deeply dedicated to their daughter. She cared for Charlotte with patience, love, and constant presence, giving Charlotte everything that Robert refused to offer. The dynamics between the three worked only because Laura carried everything alone, without expecting anything from him. But when she fell gravely ill, Robert distanced himself even further, and with her death, something in him simply broke. Without Laura, he saw no reason to continue pretending. The house fell into an even denser silence. Robert, now alone with his daughter, moved through the rooms as though no one was there except for him. The days were mechanical, and Charlotte's presence seemed more like a shadow than that of a child. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't ask anything. She sat in the corner of the room for hours, hands clasped in her lap and eyes lowered, as though afraid to take up too much space. Every gesture was restrained, as if any movement could irritate him. Robert watched her from afar with dry, impatient eyes, as though trapped in an obligation that didn't belong to him. "Have you eaten?" he said one night, without taking his eyes off the television playing at a low volume. Charlotte merely nodded, almost imperceptible. "Then go to bed. Tomorrow is another day," Robert said, getting up with an irritated sigh, as if even that sentence weighed on his mouth. She turned by herself, slowly turning her chair, and went to the bedroom. She shut the door silently, as she always did, without interrupting the stillness that had dominated everything since her mother passed. In the dark, she stayed awake, listening to the sound of her father's footsteps coming and going, the clinking of the glass in the sink, the flush of the toilet, the living room door, nothing more. And so days passed, then weeks. Robert didn't speak to anyone. He stopped answering calls. He avoided leaving the house. But while the world saw him as a man in mourning inside, he felt only a growing weight, and that weight was Charlotte. The routine with his daughter suffocated him. The girl's silent presence made him feel trapped, forced into a role he never wanted to play. "This doesn't make sense," he murmured to himself one morning, staring at the empty plate on the table. He began imagining what his life would be like without that responsibility. He thought about waking up and not having to prepare anything for anyone, about leaving and coming back whenever he wanted, about not having to explain himself, about feeling, in some way, free. These thoughts grew stronger over the days. They turned into plans, small tests of possibilities. He measured distances, researched schedules, made mental notes, erased traces of their life. He threw away papers, ripped up photos, sold the car. And then, one morning, he decided. "Charlotte, we're going out today," he said in a neutral voice as she silently drank her milk. She looked at him, surprised, but didn't say anything. "We're taking the train. It'll be quick. I have some things to take care of, and then we'll come back." She merely nodded, as she did with everything. They arrived at the station when it was already crowded. People were coming and going, street vendors, loudspeakers with announcements. Robert held a small backpack while pushing Charlotte's wheelchair with firm steps until they reached one of the almost empty train cars. He carefully wheeled her into the space reserved for wheelchair users, locked the wheels, and placed the small backpack on her lap. He looked around, as if making sure no one was paying too much attention, then leaned over slightly. "Stay here, I'll be right back," he said without hesitation, with the usual coldness he used to disguise his cowardice. Charlotte looked around, then at him with some apprehension. "Will you really come back?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Of course. I'm just going to grab something," Robert said, already walking away. The girl stayed there, still, with her eyes fixed on her father's back, trying to believe. He walked with firm steps, not looking back. He crossed the platform, disappeared among the passengers, and didn't return. Time passed. Minutes, then hours. Charlotte remained motionless, with the backpack on her lap and her eyes lowered. She didn't cry. She didn't ask anything. She just waited, as she always did. The movement of the station continued, indifferent. People passed, stumbled, bumped into each other, continued on their way. No one noticed her. Then a woman appeared. She was walking slowly, with an old bag on her shoulder, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She seemed like just another passerby, like many others, but something in her expression was different, as though she had plenty of time and an excess of sensitivity. When she saw the wheelchair sitting in the train car with the little girl alone, motionless and with a lost gaze, she slowed her pace. She watched for a few seconds before approaching. "Hi, sweetie," the woman said, crouching next to Charlotte. "Are you waiting for someone?" Charlotte looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. "My dad, he said he was coming back, but it's been a long time," the girl responded softly. "How long? Do you know?" She hesitated. "I don't know. A long time." The woman looked around, her stomach twisting. No one seemed to be paying attention. There was no adult nearby, just the small, fragile child, abandoned there. "Do you have any documents? A phone number, your mom's name?" the woman asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "No, just my dad's name, Robert." "All right, sweetie, let's get you out of here. Let's find some help," the woman said, standing up and calmly pushing the chair. At the police station, the woman explained what she had seen. She said she was a retired teacher, had worked with children for many years, and knew immediately that something was wrong. The officers were moved. A disabled child, alone in a station, abandoned. Charlotte kept repeating the same thing. He said he was coming back, and nothing else. The authorities began their procedures. They searched for the father's name. The school records were old. The address pointed to an empty, locked house, uninhabited for months. The phone number no longer existed. Robert had erased every trace before disappearing. "He planned this," said a social worker. "This wasn't abandonment out of desperation. This was strategy." Without witnesses, without proof of the moment he left, the case dissolved. There were missing pieces for an accusation. And so Charlotte was classified simply as another vulnerable child, without identified guardians. The case lost momentum, and Robert got what he wanted, to disappear without facing any consequences. Charlotte was sent to an orphanage. She entered mute, with her eyes lowered, expressionless. In the first days, the caregivers tried to get close, but she recoiled. "Do you want something to eat?" one of the assistants said in a calm tone. Charlotte shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "Do you want to play with the other children?" The response was silence. She didn't interact. She didn't smile. She didn't ask anything. "She speaks, but only the bare minimum," one caregiver said to another. "But there's something in her eyes that weighs heavily." The children watched her with curiosity, some with indifference, others with fear of the unknown. Charlotte didn't react to provocation or invitations. She always stayed in the same corner near the window, drawing with short pencils and loose sheets of paper. "Do you like to draw?" one of the staff members said, noticing the papers. She nodded. "You can take more sheets if you want. It's okay." It was her way of existing. She drew simple figures, soft outlines, sad shapes. She didn't use many colors. Those images said what she couldn't yet express. The time passed in the orphanage as if the days dragged on in silence. For Charlotte, everything was still strange. The smell of the hallways, the noise of children running, the rigid meal times, the loud announcements from caregivers calling out names that weren't hers. Every day was like the one before, and each night ended with her looking out the window, drawing on old sheets with light strokes, as if she feared the world would notice she was there. Nothing seemed to change until one ordinary morning, two people walked through the main gate with calm steps and open eyes, Emily and Nicholas. They didn't look like the other visitors. They didn't bring big gifts or ask quick questions like those who are looking to fill a void. They observed, they listened, they smiled sincerely. Emily wore simple clothes, her hair in an improvised bun, her attentive gaze, hands always ready to calm. Nicholas had broad shoulders, a short beard, and fingers marked by paint and wood, signs of someone who worked with their hands but spoke with delicacy. When they passed the room where some children were drawing, they noticed Charlotte in the corner, focused on a paper already folded at the corners. "Did you see that girl there?" Emily said, lowering her voice. "Yes, she seems quiet," Nicholas replied, "but there's something in the way she is, like she's trying to hide inside herself." The orphanage coordinator followed them patiently, taking notes and explaining profiles. "Her name is Charlotte. She doesn't speak much. She arrived a few months ago. She was found alone at a station with a backpack in her lap. The wheelchair has been hers since she was young. We're still trying to figure out the best way to help her." "And does she have any relatives?" Nicholas asked. "No one identified. The father disappeared. He planned everything. We haven't been able to locate him. She has no one else. She's one of the most delicate children here." Emily looked at her again. "Can we talk to her?" "Of course. Just be careful. She doesn't react well to sudden approaches." Nicholas stepped forward a little and stopped at a respectful distance. "Hi," he said in a calm tone, as if speaking to someone who might flee at any moment. Charlotte lifted her eyes for a second, then returned to her drawing. "Is this your drawing?" She didn't answer. "I like to draw too," he said, crouching to her level, "but I was never very good at it. Do you do this every day?" Charlotte nodded. Emily slowly approached, smiling. "Do you want more sheets to draw? We can bring them to you. If you want, of course." Charlotte looked at her with confusion. She didn't seem distrustful. She seemed puzzled. "You don't need to say anything now," Emily said. "We just wanted to meet you." They didn't stay too long on that first visit, but they came back the next day, and the next, and the next. Each time they stayed a little longer, sometimes just watching, sometimes telling stories. Nicholas brought small notebooks with colorful covers. Emily brought pens, pencils, and even a little block with paints. "This is yours if you want to use it," Nicholas said one afternoon when the sun was shining directly through the window. Charlotte took the block carefully, as if it was something borrowed. "You can take it to your room." "It's yours," Emily said with a smile. Charlotte didn't answer, but that day she drew for longer than usual. By the end of the day, a caregiver approached Emily. "She likes you. She just doesn't know how to show it." "And she doesn't have to," Emily replied. "We're waiting." After a few weeks, they began the adoption process. The interviews, the documents, the official meetings, the orphanage helped everything go smoothly. The team knew that with them, Charlotte would have what she needed most, stability and respect. When everything was approved, the day of the move arrived. "Do you want to take these drawings with you?" Nicholas asked as they packed things. Charlotte nodded. She took the folded papers and put them in the backpack. It was the same one she had carried on the day of her abandonment, now full of drawings and colored pencils. When they arrived at the new house, Emily showed her the room. There was an adapted bed, an empty shelf, light curtains, and a fluffy rug. "This is your space. No one will touch your things without asking. If you want to change anything, just say so." Nicholas entered with a wooden support and a small drawing table. "This is for you to set up your notebooks if you want. I'll help you." Charlotte looked at everything in silence. Her eyes slowly moved across the space, as though trying to understand if it was real. The first few months were about adaptation. Charlotte didn't speak much. She was still shy, reserved, observant, but there was a difference. Here, she knew she didn't need to be afraid. Nicholas and Emily never pressured her, but they were always nearby. "Do you want help drawing this?" Nicholas said, pointing to a draft. "No," she whispered. "Okay, only if you want." Over time, she started responding more. Then she started asking. She began to trust. Emily took care of meal schedules, baths, and medications. Nicholas made toys, paintings, and created color schemes for her notebooks. "This girl will go far," he said one time. "Did you see how she builds the scenes? She imagines things I couldn't even build in a model. She doesn't speak much, but when she draws, she screams," Emily replied, smiling. Slowly, Charlotte stopped just copying the world and started creating her own. She created characters that flew without wings, wheelchairs that turned into boats, children who talked to the wind. In her teenage years, her passion for digital design exploded. Nicholas noticed the sparkle in her eyes when she saw an illustration software open. "Want to try?" he asked, moving the mouse. She nodded. The next day, Emily had already enrolled her in an online course. "It's just the basics, but it helps," she said. "If you like it, we'll keep going." Charlotte liked it, a lot. She advanced through the modules faster than anyone expected. She started creating illustrations with a unique visual language. Her lines were melancholic but powerful, sensitive yet firm. She gained followers on social media, praise from teachers, invitations to events. At 17, one of her projects, an illustrated book about forgotten children, went viral. "Did you see this?" Nicholas said, showing Emily his phone. "It's everywhere. She made it. She deserves it." At 19, Charlotte was nationally known. She gave interviews, won awards, and was hailed as an example of overcoming and genius. And it was during this time in the spotlight that the shadow of the past decided to return. Robert appeared as a name in small letters at the bottom of a news article. Biological father says he found his daughter after years of searching. Emily received a call from a journalist before even reading the article. "Do you have any comment?" "About what?" "Robert says his daughter disappeared years ago, and he sought help, but never got answers. He said he suffered in silence, and now, seeing her on TV, just wants a chance to reunite." Nicholas was in the kitchen when he heard the conversation. He came into the room, his eyes wide. "He reappeared?" "Yes, and he's lying and portraying himself as a victim." "Of course he is." On TV, Robert's face appeared with a contained expression, simulating pain. "It was very hard. I searched for my daughter. There were no answers. I suffered in silence. When I saw her on TV, my heart raced. I just want to see her. Nothing more." Charlotte watched in silence. His face, after all these years, caused a strange feeling, as though the pain from before was just waiting for an excuse to reappear. "Do you want us to turn it off?" Nicholas asked. She shook her head negatively. "He's going to try to come after you," Emily said, sitting next to her. "I know," Charlotte replied, looking at the screen, "but I'm not that girl on the train anymore." In the following days, Robert's face continued to appear in newspapers and on screens, accompanied by words like reunion, emotion, forgiveness. To those watching from the outside, the image presented was that of a man marked by pain who had spent years searching for his missing daughter. He spoke carefully, rehearsed. His posture was composed, his voice soft, his eyes artificially teary. "I never stopped looking," he said to the camera, "but I had no support. The authorities did nothing. Years of despair, sleepless nights, living with this hole in my chest. When I saw her on TV, I recognized her immediately. She's my daughter. She always was." In the same interview, he uttered the phrase that caused the most outrage among those who knew the truth. "She was very little back then. She won't remember. She can't remember. But I remember every detail. I would never abandon my daughter, never." Emily saw that and clenched her fists, trying to contain the urge to scream. "Liar," she said, not taking her eyes off the screen. "He's creating a soap opera," Nicholas said, pacing the room. "Look at this. He's being treated like a victim." The story spread quickly. Some people believed it. There were comments on social media saying that Charlotte should at least listen to him. Others said it was absurd to try to get close now that she was famous. The division of opinions grew. "We just want the truth," said a journalist on a late-night show. "If he's lying, why would he do this now?" The answer came soon after. Robert filed a lawsuit. He demanded recognition of paternity and requested gradual, supervised contact. "This is absurd," Emily said, receiving the subpoena. "He wants to use the system to validate a lie." "He never looked for her." "Never," Nicholas said, his voice choked. "And now he wants to take even her right to forget." The case went to court. The repercussion was immediate. Headlines began circulating with scandalous tones. Talk shows wanted Charlotte. They asked for her version, her emotions. She declined them all. She remained silent but firm. "I won't justify something I didn't do," she said, looking at her adoptive parents. "He's the one who should be explaining himself." The adoption lawyers gathered documents, testimonies, old records. They searched every step of the adoption process, every school record, every attempt at contact before. There was nothing. Not a single report of disappearance filed by Robert. No occurrence. No proof he had searched for his daughter. "The record is clean. Clean because he never did anything," the lawyer said in one of the meetings. "There isn't even a single phone call recorded at a police station." At the preliminary hearing, Robert presented his version with the same well-disguised coldness. He said he lost his daughter on a trip, that she wandered off, that he panicked, that he ran to the police. He said he filed a missing persons report but never received any feedback. "Do you have the case number?" the judge asked. "I didn't keep it. At the time, my concern was just her." "Do you have any witnesses that you looked for her?" "No, I was alone." "Then why were the school records outdated? Why was the address false?" "It was a coincidence. I moved shortly before. Everything was confusing." "You deleted all your information before she disappeared." "I was trying to start over. I had a lot of pain. I made a mistake, but I didn't abandon her." On the other side of the room, Emily was holding Charlotte's hand. Nicholas watched it all with clenched jaws. Charlotte was serious but firm. She didn't look away. "Would you like to testify now?" the lawyer asked. She nodded. She entered the reserved room, accompanied by a psychologist and the judge. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" the judge asked carefully. "Yes," Charlotte answered. "He left me on a train. He said he was coming back, and he never came back. I stayed there for hours, alone." "And do you remember that?" "Yes. I remember the backpack on my lap, the sound of the station. I remember his face walking away. I remember the fear." "And how do you feel now, knowing that he wants to approach? He was never my father, not really. He saw me as a burden. He never wanted me. My family is Emily and Nicholas. They chose me, they respect me, they love me. I don't want to see him. I want nothing from him." The judge made notes in silence. The testimony was recorded and added to the case. Weeks later, they found the woman who helped Charlotte at the station. She also testified. "I found her alone, sitting in a wheelchair inside a train car. She said her father was coming back, but he never came back. I waited. I asked. She had no contact with anyone. I took her straight to the police." "Are you sure no one else was around? No adults with her?" "Absolutely. He left her there and walked away. It was abandonment." The strength of the truth began to assert itself. Robert's narrative began to crumble. The court officially recognized the adoption as final and irrevocable. Robert was prevented from having any contact or legal rights over Charlotte. There was no criminal punishment. The lack of evidence and witnesses prevented that. But the repercussion destroyed his public image. Social media attacked him. He lost his job. Family members rejected him. Friends distanced themselves. He tried to sue journalists who criticized him, but no one took him seriously. He became synonymous with cowardice. "Now they want to crucify me," he said in a failed interview attempt, "just because I tried to reconnect." "You tried to clean yourself up at the expense of those you abandoned," the reporter replied, "and that has a price." Meanwhile, Charlotte moved forward. She released 2 more illustrated books. One of them won international awards. She started an NGO to support children with disabilities, providing access to art, education, and inclusion. She was discreet but firm. Her shyness was now accompanied by a strong presence. "She's incredible," Nicholas said, watching one of her interviews. "She's herself, and we were just lucky to see it up close," Emily replied. One afternoon, Charlotte organized a tribute, not for herself, but for the woman from the station, the one who saw, the one who acted. She invited her to an NGO event and introduced her to a full audience. "This woman took me out of silence," Charlotte said on stage. "When no one saw me, she stopped. If it weren't for her, maybe I wouldn't be here." The woman walked to the stage with difficulty. She was older, but her eyes were still attentive. She cried, as she hadn't cried that old morning. And Robert. He watched everything from afar, unable to intervene, with nothing to claim, with his name stained, loneliness for company, and the silence he had once ignored now weighing on him. He understood, too late, that those who abandon for convenience rarely have the right to return. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.